Okay. So welcome back, everybody. How are you doing? It's great to see you back for Renewables in Action podcast, right? So in a world rapidly transforming, there are a few voices that actually speak as compelling as possible about the future of transportation, but also sustainable technology as our guest. So I guess, who is our guest, right? So you want to guess, right? He's an internationally recognized author and also thought leader. So he has dedicated his career to really understanding the intricate connection that we have between technology, between society, and also global change, right? He's written 8 books. Yes, 8 books, guys. So that's actually quite a lot, right? It's not insignificant. Exploring the global energy transformation, and also in those books offering a unique perspective on how electric vehicles are not just changing the way we move, but also reshaping all our entire societal infrastructure. So today, what we're gonna do is, so you and I, is to dive deep into the electric revolution. Exploring the challenges, the innovation, but also potential of electric vehicle that promises to really redefine this world. So looking at the infrastructure challenges to the technological breakthrough. So our guest, who is called Mats Larsson, yeah, exactly. It brings a comprehensive visionary approach to understanding how or electromobility, should I say, is actually set to transform our collective future. So let me just welcome here, without further ado, Matt. So, given a chance to just to connect. Hello, Matt. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent, Matt. It's a real pleasure for me to have you here. So, as I was just saying to you before, we jump on the call. So, I read about your journey, what you've done, to 8 books you've written. I think there's probably more than 2 to 3 podcast interview that we can do with you.
Ah, I'll be pleased.
So no, that is great. So we are very much happy to have you here, and we want to talk about obviously electric vehicles. So the way they shape the way things are moving forward in terms of transportation. But before we dive into that, as I say, your journey into the sustainable transportation, but also the global energy transformation is really quite something. Right? It's fascinating, and I just want to stop for a few seconds just to understand a little bit your personal experience and understand what is that moment that really sparked your passion for electric vehicles and the way it actually brings sustainable societal change. Maybe you can give us some
Mm,
understanding of that.
yes, it was in 2003. I read a book about the peak in oil production that would come. And the author explained that after the peak in oil production, uh, the oil supply the oil would go down. So the amount of oil that would be available every year would go down. Now that hasn't happened, but I yet. But I realized that at that point, um, we will face tremendous difficulties in terms of transportation, and we will have to do with a lot less transportation opportunities, and the cost of transportation will increase dramatically as uh, oil obviously is the fuel that fuels most of global transportation by car, by truck, by bus, etc., and also by ship, and so on. So I started to investigate what are the hurdles that need to be overcome. How do we need to organize the change to renewable fuels in order to prepare ahead of this um, event that will happen sooner or later.
Mhm. Okay, excellent. So basically, it's that spark in the 2003 that sort of trigger you to have a look at that. Okay, excellent. That's great. And I know you actually written extensively about those challenges. How do we transition into electric vehicle? And that's very much a key question. So how do we make it happen? And I just want to find out from you. So what do you believe are the most significant barrier that could prevent a faster and also more widespread adoption of EV globally?
There are several barriers, and a lot of this change has been simplified and probably oversimplified by sustainability experts and people who have, well, looked at it with a too optimistic point of view. So it's one of the aspects that we have to overcome is the cost of the vehicles, and that's not likely to go down at the speed that many have expected so far, and subsidies will continue to be important and necessary both for lorries and for cars for a long period into the future. So that is one of the aspects that I believe is important and that has been overlooked. And subsidies will have to be paid by governments, and we have to pay them eventually through our taxes. So, and one of the another aspect and another thing that we need to deal with is the expansion of infrastructure. We need to there is not enough electricity in any country to run all cars and all lorries, all buses on electricity. We need to most countries will need to dramatically expand power production, and that will take a long time because building large amounts of power generation in the form of power plants, wind farms, and large parks of solar panels will take a number of years, and it will involve very large investment. So at the moment, if all cars and the lorries and buses would be in Europe would be electric, we'd need 3,000 kilowatt hours per person and year to fuel those vehicles. So 3,000 kilowatt hours. And in many countries like the UK, Italy, the present power generation amounts to 4,000 kilowatt hours. So 75% of the power generated in these very affluent countries would need to be used for electric vehicles in case all vehicles were electric. And in Germany, they have 6,000 kilowatt hours per person, but still 3,000 kilowatt hours is a huge amount. It's a huge share of the power generated. And in Sweden, we are slightly more fortunate. We have 12,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per person, but it's still a formidable amount that we need to set aside, and we need to also expand not only power generation but grid capacity. I'm running a project right now looking at the need to expand grid capacity to charge lorries in a town here in southern Sweden, and we find that huge investments would be needed in the power grids, in the local power grids, in order to facilitate the charging of large numbers of lorries. And yet the EU has decided to rapidly phase out diesel trucks and instead force both transportation companies but also automotive companies that produce the vehicles to speed this change and this transformation up. So this will be a really big hurdle, but also the access to competence, the knowledge. Very few people have understand this, and very few people have. Well, it's basically I and some colleagues that have done most of this analysis, and most people don't have a clue that about these needs. So a lot of people need to acquire this understanding and need to learn about the changes in order to be able to take the roles that will be needed to expand infrastructure, to expand the vehicle fleets, to expand all the things that need to be expanded and invested in for the transformation to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's what you say is very interesting because I consider myself, let's say, relatively knowledgeable on topic compared to the average citizen, because obviously I'm already in the sector and I'm dealing with these questions, let's say, on a more frequent basis than the general public would be. And yet I'm very impressed and surprised for what you said, because if I summarize that, you talked about the fact that number one, there is sort of a non-realization of the real amount of power generation that we need to support a proper shift into electric vehicle, if all the vehicle were to be shifted into electric. Then you talk about the fact that we also need to adapt the grid to obviously accommodate that. And thirdly, you talked about the let's say the missing gap in terms of capacity building. So, to have the right skills to tackle that. Yeah, I think I've sometimes heard about the first two, but rarely about the third one, which is capacity building. But I ask you, out of those three key questions, I'd like to know which one do you think would be the most urgent, for government, but also private sector to look at? Because I don't think we could tackle all of them at the same time. I'm sure we can make a plan that will be coordinated. We talk about that in a minute. But what would be for you the key priority right now?
Well, the most long-term change and the one that takes the longest the longest time is the expansion of infrastructure. Building large amounts of power generation will take decades, and and expanding power grids will also take a very long time because power grids almost everywhere will have to expand. So and this will take decades, as I said, and it's really important that governments start the process of analyzing these needs and start to find the financing for these investments. The Swedish government is currently starting to plan the construction of nuclear power plants, but those will take at least a decade and probably more to build. And in the past, in the 1960s until through the 70s and 80s, in Sweden we built 12 nuclear power plants, and that process was started in the early 60s, and it went on for 30 years to complete 12 nuclear power plants, and the necessary transmission grids and distribution grids to handle all that amount of power. And those are the cycles that we need to look at. And the Swedish government plans to provide guarantees for the companies that need to invest, because these are very long-term and very risky investments. So that needs to be organized, and the financing needs to be set aside to manage this. But in Europe, in order to do this, in all countries, as I said, some 50% of the power generated at present will have to be used to power electric vehicles. So, and that amounts to about 1,300 terawatt hours, which is the power generated by, say, 120 nuclear reactors, 120 nuclear reactors, or a commensurate number of wind turbines, like 400,000 wind turbines, if we do it all by wind. And in addition to those wind turbines, we need battery battery storage facilities and other storage facilities, perhaps storage in the form of hydrogen or methanol, to even out fluctuations in wind generation if we have a lot of wind generation. So those are very large investment programs that will be needed, and they need to start now. We can't wait with the planning of those until some more people have bought some more electric cars and electric lorries and so on. So that is the most urgent aspect of this, and also the training of people, because hundreds of thousands of people will need to be involved in this expansion. It's not only about building a few power plants and selling some more vehicles. We need to, well, utilities will have to reinforce power grids in many places. We will have to build charging areas along motorways in city centers. And at present, in Europe, we have 3% electric cars and less than 1% electric lorries. So we haven't experienced anything near the amount of vehicles that we will have once this change or this transformation speeds up. So there will be a need for football fields of chargers along motorways in big countries. Not so many in Sweden. We're a small country, 10 million people. But in Germany, in France, they will need football fields of chargers along the motorways at regular intervals. One professor here at Lund University, Mats Larsson, he calculated, like back of envelope calculation, that every 60 kilometers along German motorways, there would need to be a football field of chargers for cars. And in case we would have electric lorries as well, there would need to be a football field of chargers for them as well. And as you know, they take up more space, etc. But there are huge numbers of cars, and if all of them and the lorries, and if all of them would be electric, there would be a need for huge numbers of chargers and huge numbers of charging areas around our countries. So that's also an aspect, and in order to build all this, hundreds of thousands of people will need to be involved.
Yeah. So I think you're making quite a very interesting and strong case. What could say, if I play the devil's advocate, that with all those challenges that you've just listed, that take such a long time, decade, as you mentioned. So we're almost bound to think that either it won't happen and we need a significant technological breakthrough to bring it to proportion that are feasible, isn't it? Because football fields of chargers, it's not going to happen. Let's be honest. So
no.
So what is the way forward then?
Well, the EU has already decided both to ban the sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2035, and to start to phase out diesel lorries starting almost immediately. And so, but as you say, it's a really big agenda to change all vehicles over this short space of time, and the investments needed will be immense. So it's it's difficult to see how it could succeed. And one of the things that could help solve this puzzle of different charging alternatives and how we should build charging infrastructure could be electric roads, wireless charging roads, that roads with the tracks in electric tracks in the in the road surface, so that we could charge as we go. And if we had those, we would not need that big amount of chargers for stationary charging. We would still have to have some, but we would not need that amount. So most of the charging could, in that case, be made through electric roads. So that is one of the solutions that could facilitate this change and become some type of game changer. But those would also need to be implemented, and the decisions to implement those would have to be made very soon in order for them to have effect.
Okay, that's interesting. And what kind of social and economic, I would say, transformation do you anticipate? Because you also clearly mentioned, and which is true, I know that government in the EU, in the UK as well, have already taken the decision by 2030, 35, so just going to phase out new sales of let's say petrol and diesel engine. So we gotta see more electric vehicles. That means something will have to happen. So what kind of social and economic transformation then do you anticipate?
Well, it's the change will have very big social and economic consequences, regardless of what happens or how this goes, because based on the EU decision, automotive companies will have to rapidly reduce the number of petrol and diesel cars they make and the number of diesel lorries they make, and making electric vehicles requires much fewer hours of assembly and of parts production. So like 40% less hours of for the manufacturing of a electric car compared to a petrol or diesel car. So if this goes through and the EU gets it's their way, like we build our fleets of electric vehicles in a relatively short space of time, we will find that a lot of people will be laid off, as has started already. I've seen car factories and being closed down across Europe in the news. So and that this will continue because well, parts production and machining and so on that's necessary to make petrol and diesel vehicles will have to be reduced, and many companies in those areas will reduce their turnover or go out of business because there will not be a need for like metal parts for engines and so on if we produce only electric cars. So this is this industry is currently held up because it's currently kept busy because we are still having a lot of hybrids, and those are cars with both petrol or diesel engines and electric motors. So hybrids, they still require the traditional amount of parts for the petrol and diesel engines and for the drivetrain and so on. But the full electric cars, they don't need that. And the idea is that we change to fully electric vehicles, which inevitably will make a lot of people jobless and will increase the unemployment, and the automotive industry and its suppliers represent a very large source of employment, both in Europe, in the United States, in Japan. There are like 15 million people in Europe in total working with automotive companies and their suppliers, and almost the same number work in these industries in Japan and in the US. So that'll be a really big social and economic change, and we will have to, in some way, create new jobs for them. But it's highly unlikely that these people will find new jobs in their present industries, because there will not be a lot of new jobs created. That amount of new jobs will not be created in mechanical engineering or in engine assembly or in similar types of vocations as we over the coming 5 or 10 years. So these people will have to be retrained, get training for new jobs, and they will have to perhaps move to new regions, because the regions where the automotive industry is currently strong aren't necessarily the regions that will grow in terms of supplying electric motors or charging posts or material for power plants and so on.
That is very, very interesting. Thanks for that, Matt, for sharing that. Especially so you may not know that I'm actually an automotive engineer. That's how I train. So I used to work for a company like Ford, and I was more specifically focusing on engines. So as a calibration engineer, that's what I used to do in my previous job. So listening to you, it almost seems like you telling me that 80% of my former colleague will be gone.
Well, say 40% fewer man hours means that, but it's a part of these companies and a part of these industries, but there would still, of course, be a need for salespeople and others. But say a few million people in Europe could be made unemployed through this change.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. Obviously, we're laughing because it's impressive, but it doesn't mean it's not a laughing stock, obviously, because if you are at the receiving end of those policy changes that we're seeing, it's definitely not easy. But what you've also highlighted, which also means that in terms of capacity building or skill upgrade, there is a massive, massive opportunity there for whoever can step in and actually help all those workers that will lose their job, a lot of them in the engineering, to sort of fit into the new economy that is actually being designed in front of our own eyes. So, and that is why I value very much having conversation with experts like yourself, help us see the road ahead, and hopefully help prepare people about what it's about to happen in order for them to make the necessary adjustment. So I think that's very good. And
yes,
in your writing, I think you also, could I say you wrote 8 books, which is, I don't even know how you do it with all the work that you're doing. But you mentioned about the need for some massive and coordinated approach on sustainable technology. And I want to know, because, for example, back in the days when President Kennedy decided that, hey, we were going to go on the moon, I don't know when, obviously, nobody had an idea how to make it happen, but obviously because decision was taken a little bit like now, we say decision is taken to go to EVs. That's the direction of travel. So back in the days, they made a decision, so they went to the moon and so on and so forth. What would you say is the moonshot strategy for electric vehicle and green infrastructure? So how would it look like for in the world in today's world?
That's a very good question. I see. Well, if you compare these situations, the Apollo program to the change to electric vehicles, we see that in the change to electric vehicles, governments and companies focus entirely on vehicles and on charging infrastructure. But so far, not so much focus has been on the power infrastructure and the investment needed there, and training of people to be able to manage these and work in these different roles that are going to arise. And when President Kennedy challenged NASA and the United States, the American people, to send a man to the moon, NASA started to plan the entire program, and they looked at all the different components that would be needed: the rocket, the space capsule, the moon lander, the firing ramp, the big building, the vehicle assembly building where they would build the rockets and assemble them, the crawler, the vehicle that would carry the rocket from the vehicle assembly building out to this to the firing ramp. So all of these things, and the space center in Houston, where they did the communication with the space with the capsule and the astronauts. They built as well. So everything was planned. We need all these things, and that started in very soon after Kennedy gave his challenge. So, and the same type of approach will be needed in order to avoid major setbacks in the change to electric vehicles. Because just to take this example of people getting fired, if we focus only on the vehicles, a lot fewer people will be needed in order to build those the electric vehicles. But a lot of people will be needed in order to reinforce power infrastructure, build new power plants, install chargers, and so on. And as you know, and also to build the electric vehicles and so on. And a lot of people will be needed in areas where we don't actually foresee any expansion, but we can consider that if we need to build electric roads, if we need to build large charging areas along motorways or close to city centers, and there will be a lot of people needed for both the planning of these things and the building the strategies for doing this, and working out the strategies in the companies that are going to operate this infrastructure, etc. So there will be a need for a lot of people with different talents and different types of training. But if we just focus on changing the vehicles and changing the production, a lot of people will be laid off, but no new jobs will be created. So people will need to be trained for these new jobs in the sectors I mentioned, like power and building power plants, or building constructing different aspects of the power infrastructure, building chargers and so on, and building up the business models for the companies that are going to run the different parts of these systems. And that will require much more people than we currently expect. And governments will need to take a bird's eye view of this, and to actually realize that a lot of things will happen that they have not foreseen, and they will have to plan this entire scheme, or the entire process of transformation in the way that NASA planned the Apollo program and the other space programs that follow the Apollo program.
Excellent. That's a very, very good comparison that you made there. So essentially what you're saying here, we need to have, like you say, bird eye view, holistic approach of what will happen. Yes, people, like you say, are bound to lose their jobs. When we're looking only at the vehicle shift in terms of the production of vehicles. So there's not much we can do out there. However, so if we are clever enough, plan things well in advance and it's properly coordinated, these same people can find a new opportunity, maybe even better opportunity for them along the value chain. That will need a drastic and dramatic change. So that is actually very good to know. And because one thing that you made very clear is that in the road that we see ahead, because of the seismic shift that we're about to see, technology will play a key role. And I just wanted to know, are there some technological advancement? Because I know you're further advanced in the field than most of us. You've done some serious studies on that. Are there any emerging innovation that excite you that you believe will be game changer in the next decades?
Well, yes, I think the innovation of electric roads or similar systems is a very exciting innovation, and it opens up opportunities, but it also presents challenges because it will be difficult to finance it, and it will be difficult to get people and companies to pay for charging on electric roads when they have the alternative of charging at home and paying less for charging at home. So if they pay, if we have to pay, say, 50 pence or 50 euro cents for a kilowatt hour charged in the public charging infrastructure or at for charging on an electric road, we can probably pay 10p or 10 euro cents for charging at home. So it will be much less expensive. But yet, if we build electric roads, that would solve many problems, and well, it would reduce the amount of power generation needed, because it would even out the power demand over the day and over 24 hours, uh, instead of charging very rapidly. In many instances, we could cars and other vehicles could charge slowly over the whole day, and that would reduce the need for power generation, the need for investment in power grids, the need for chargers and charging areas could be much smaller, and so on. And it could also, when these systems would be fully developed, extensive in each country, they would it would be possible to reduce the size of the batteries in cars, because you wouldn't have to drive so much on the battery if you can if you can charge while driving on the road.
That's very interesting. So basically, what you're saying that if you had a couple of million to spare, this is where you're probably going to be.
Well, I realize it's not a straightforward investment, and it's not a rapid payback. But for a government that's looking at the different opportunities, I'd consider very carefully the opportunity of electric roads, and I'd investigate very carefully the amount of investment that would be necessary in order to build systems for stationary charging, because that amount of investment will be huge, and the amount of money needed to be invested in electric roads would be much smaller.
Yes, and you mentioned government here, which you haven't talked too much about. But let me just ask you that one last question, because I can't let you go before that question. So, what kind of leadership do you think we need for the next 50 years, 30 to 50 years? If we are to look at this interconnection between the energy, the transportation system and infrastructure. So, I could describe, because they clearly interconnected, and they will change. They will need to change anyway if we are to implement that policy. So, what kind of leadership do you think we need, both from government but also private sector?
Well, I think this will be hard to swallow, but over the past decades, governments have stepped back in terms of competence building and in terms of decision making in many areas, and they've said correctly in many cases, that the market can allocate resources to the areas where they are most needed. But when it comes to new technologies in early phases of their development, they are not competitive, and they can't. I mean, we couldn't build just big electric vehicle systems for charging and everything, and they wouldn't be competitive immediately against petrol and diesel vehicle systems. So there will be a big need for political decision making in order to make these systems and the entire change come about. So there will have to be much more visionary leadership, and politicians, unfortunately, I mean, it would be very, very good, I think, if the market could control everything, also in early phases of technology development, but it can't. So they would have to take a much stronger role in the planning and in the execution of these big change programs, in the way, and not, of course, President Kennedy, he didn't take lead NASA, but he made the money available to NASA so that NASA could organize and run and manage the Apollo program. So and the same has been is the case in defense sectors. The defense minister, the minister of defense, doesn't himself make all the decisions about the selection of, like, we'll have this fighter plane, we'll have these destroyers, we have and we have these drones, but they allocate money to in the defense, the Ministry of Defense, for the various technologies and systems needed, and the commander in chief makes a lot of decisions together with the various commanders of the various the army and the air force and so on. So they allocate the money in order to build this, and they keep a holistic view of what will be needed and what will be needed in order for these systems to become strong and be able to to fight the modern war, basically. And we need to have the same type of view, or governments need to take the same type of view on the transportation systems and the power supply for those, in order to build the systems. They don't need to to do all of it themselves. They don't need to make micro decisions and micromanage the entire process, but they need to allocate resources and build up the decision making structures and the management structures, like NASA, like the defense sector, and so on, that can build these resources on behalf of the government.
Excellent. So essentially, we're saying to government, we need your money, and after that, just watch us create miracle for you.
Yeah.
That's well. So I must admit, so it's what you say. It's obviously true in the sense that those new technologies, because they knew they can't be competitive, so they need a number of support from government. So big part of it, it's financial support, but not only that, but also regulatory support, and also as well in terms of guarantee and obviously absorbing a number of risk. That's great. That's the kind of, let's say, engagement that we see at the moment. So if you followed recently, you have the UK government and Norway who decided to partner to support carbon capture, which is one of the technology that is put upfront in order to move towards decarbonization. And the UK have been taking that decision because they've decided by 2030 they want to drastically reduce by 85% the number of emissions that they're producing. So clearly, we really see goes from, like we were talking about the Apollo program here, there is a decision taken by leadership, and after that leadership, obviously look at how do we now implement that, they turn toward now the private sector to do it. So that was clearly explained by you here. Great, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for the time you've taken to sort of lay it out in front of us the challenges, but also the big opportunity that we see with the shift towards the electric vehicle. So we can't really wait to see that. It was great to have you here discussing that. I don't know, maybe you have one final word before we can let you go. What would that be?
Yeah, I think there's a big need for visionary leaders in this, and there is a big need for leaders who understand the system aspects of this change. And well, there is a need for uh, coordination, for management, and for strategy development in this. And I think there is at present not enough people who are addressing these big overall decisions. And I'd like to encourage people to learn more about these challenges, to learn more about the complexity and scale of them, and to participate in this discussion about what will be needed. And I'd be very happy to have more discussions with you or with people who have different ideas than myself.
Excellent. So, in other words, let me just say that in other words for you guys, what Matt is clearly saying here, well, diplomatically, if you want to be the next Elon Musk, the next billionaire, so you want to reach out to him because there's a number of ideas that have been developed. And if you're a little bit courageous and also entrepreneurial, so you may be the one taking us towards this journey, to that next part of the journey, obviously. So, thank you very much, Matt, today, because the fantastic conversation. We've learned a lot. As I say, I consider myself relatively knowledgeable into the topic, and yet I've learned massively. I've got some great insights, and you've given me some good ideas as well that I definitely will be pursuing and see how we can encourage people to move towards this direction. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to seeing you, let's say, for the second part of the conversation sometime in the future.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. I really appreciate it being on your show.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so what you've seen here, fantastic conversation, right? So, and as it draws to close, one thing it's crystal clear for me: electric vehicle, are far from just a technological shift. What they really represent, and you've heard it from Matt, it's a fundamental, reimagining of how we connect, how we move, and how we interact in the world. And what Matt has actually laid out in front of us, it's like it goes way beyond mere transportation, right? It's about creating a more sustainable, interconnected, and thoughtful global ecosystem. So yes, the road ahead is electric because decision was taken by the EU, the UK, some big countries that, by 2035, they're gonna obviously phase out those petrol diesel engines. So there's got to be some changes. It's paved with innovation, challenges, but also unprecedented opportunity. I was serious about saying that if you want to be the next billionaire into the sector, the next Elon Musk, this may be an area that you want to be looking at. Absolutely. And as we are standing on the cusp of this transformative area, so you have voices like Mats, like he said, reminding us that, this future isn't just something that happened to us. It's something that we actively create once we understand what are the challenges that we have ahead of us. And one electric mile at a time, we could make it happen. So thank you very much for staying with us and obviously supporting all the way. We're looking forward to bring you another thought leader that's going to blow your mind and tell you how we can make this future happen in front of us. Thank you very much, guys, and then I look forward to seeing you sometime in the future. Bye bye.